at the Department of Health, Social Services and Public Safety here in Northern Ireland. And when I took up this post, one of my first roles was to be the Northern Ireland lead for a new piece of work, which was called Midwifery 2020. So that was timing, wasn't it, girls? You know, I mean, it was personally and professionally a very opportune moment for me to take up the post and to be involved in such an exciting piece of work. Midwifery 2020 is coming to its conclusion. The report is to be launched this day week in Edinburgh, and I'll come to that at the end. But being so close to the launch, it's difficult to sort of talk too much about where the report is and what's going to come out in the report. So I'm going to this afternoon give you some of the background to it, where it came from, how it developed and where we've got to date. But and I will encourage you all at the end to look out this day week for the actual final report when it arrives. So the background: in April 2008, the 4 chief nursing officers in the 4 UK countries commissioned a piece of work, and it was to keep midwifery in line with some of the other professions who had done similar pieces of work, although not nearly as good, as you will find out in a week's time, such as modernising medical careers, modernising nursing careers. And it was felt that midwifery as a profession should commission a piece of work to look at where midwifery was going to be. It was unique from a midwifery perspective in that it was to be involving all of the UK countries, and it also involved all of the stakeholders who are involved in maternity services. And that was throughout the whole programme of work, because you know, you may be aware that there's not been a public consultation on the document, but that's because we involved the stakeholders throughout and in all of the aspects of the piece of work. So at the beginning, it was decided that we would needed to look at now. Where are we now as midwifery? Consider what we're doing and consider what we need to do better. And we started with that, and the aim was to look at all of that. And 2020 in itself was a little bit of a play on that, in that it was that we as a midwifery profession were to have 2020 vision of where we are now, but to look towards 2020, the year, to see where we would like to be when we got to there. And the stakeholders, the programme board was a variety of stakeholders, and they came up with what they felt were the priorities for Midwifery 2020 to look at. A programme director, Noreen Kent, who some of you may know, she works in Scotland, was appointed, and she and the 4 UK government leads took away all these priorities and sort of messed about with them and fiddled with them and got on and came up with what were the 5 work streams and what they were to be. We developed these into themes and then came up, as I say, with the 5 work streams. And we took this back to programme board, and they agreed what the priorities should be. And so in 2010, it was decided that we would deliver the recommendations for the future direction of midwifery. And that was through 5 work streams. The programme board, as I said, incorporated a number of stakeholders, all of the Royal Colleges that would be involved in maternity services, midwives obviously, obstetricians and gynaecologists, general practitioners, nurses, anaesthetists. We involved a variety of user groups, educationalists were involved, the 4 chief nursing officers were all represented on the group, and there was 4 country representation on all of the work stream groups. Initially, the programme board was chaired by the Chief Nursing Officer for Scotland, and then when he left halfway through the programme, Rosemary Kennedy, who is the Chief Nursing Officer in Wales, took over the role as chair of the programme board, and her last role as Chief Nursing Officer in Wales is to launch the document next Thursday. So the 5 work streams that were developed then were the core role of the midwife, workforce and workload, education and career progression, quality and public health. And these came from the number of themes that the stakeholders had come up with that were what they felt were the important aspects of the midwifery contribution to maternity services. So at programme board then in February 2009, the programme board were challenged to look at all the aspects that could have an effect on midwifery and the challenges that this could pose for Midwifery 2020. The political and legal aspects of it. Will we have an NHS in 2020? And if we do, will it look anything like the NHS we have today? Economic. Halfway through this programme, we entered a recession, and so the economics of midwifery and of maternity services suddenly became even more important as part of this, and the workforce challenges involved in that. Do we have enough midwives? And how do we know? It's a constant challenge to know how many midwives we're going to need. The social aspects of midwifery and of maternity care. We all know that in our parents' or our grandparents' day, you lived round the corner from your family and everybody had an integrated social life. Things are different nowadays, and what impact that's having. Single parenthood, same-sex parenthood, different types of aspects of social things that can have an effect on things. And to look at what we have been discussing for a good part of today, the technological impact on maternity services, on midwifery, and on the impact of that on what happens with women, reproductive technology and things like that. So the 5 work streams then: education and career progression. This group was led by England. Each of the 5 work streams was led by a different country, but there was, as I said earlier, 4 country representation on each group, and we in Northern Ireland had someone on all of the 5 groups, and a number of people on some of them. And the scope of this work included to look at the current midwifery education provision. Are we doing it right? Is it fit for purpose? Are we producing the midwives that we need to produce, both in numbers and in the type of person that we are training? Career structures. There was an impression that the career structure for midwifery was really quite flat. You got to sort of head of midwifery or lead midwife for education, and then there wasn't an awful lot of career potential for you within the midwifery structure. So it was to look to see, was there any other directions for that. The future needs of newly qualified midwives, which there's a number of down at the back of the room there, who have probably heard this talk before, and preceptorship arrangements and what that means to both newly qualified midwives and what it means to midwives who are having to provide the preceptorship, and the potential for midwives to contribute to the research base and deliver evidence-based practice, clinical career pathways and things like that. And then the image of midwifery, both the image of midwifery as a career choice and the image of midwifery from the woman's perspective. The Royal College of Midwives, as part of this, carried out a piece of work looking at the image of midwifery, and it's really very interesting. Most people's image of a midwife is either of the little lady with twin setting pearls, who's awfully kind but not terribly useful, or a gin swilling witch who's not terribly kind but might actually be quite useful. So it was an interesting comparison that's how the public, to a certain extent, viewed midwives. Measuring quality, and this group was also led by England, and the focus of its work was to look at the existing metrics. And it was very interesting as this work progressed that there were very few existing metrics that looked just at the midwifery measurements. And it was something that the group has come up with, thinking that we need to look at what can we measure that is specifically around the midwife's contribution. Clinical quality and outcome indicators. Measuring the woman's experience, we're not very good at doing that. We're very good at asking her, was everything okay? But she's just about to leave the maternity ward with a bundle of joy, so of course it was. But if you ask her a little while later, it maybe might be a different answer that you get. And do women and the greater part of maternity care value the midwifery contribution? There was differences in all of the 4 countries on how we measure things. There were different data sets on how we measure things, different definitions. What is normal birth? It depends. If you're in England, you are allowed an epidural. If you're in Scotland, you're not. And but there could be a definition of normal birth either way. So it's about, and this group was about making sure that we got these indicators developed that would incorporate all of the 4 countries. Public Health Group was probably the one. Northern Ireland led this group in conjunction with Scotland. It was very much a two-way group, and Martin Bradley, as he said this morning, our Chief Nursing Officer, chaired this group. And the focus and the scope of this work was to include inequalities, parenting education, early years work, and the multi-agency working that's so important in public health. I think as midwives we don't do ourselves justice in our contribution towards the public health of both women and of children and of the future nation. But we also are a little bit insular in some ways about not working with other professionals to make sure that the public health message is getting across from the right person, not necessarily just from us. And as part of this, we sort of divided it into 3 streams of work to recognise the public health component of a midwife's role, and we recorded these skills and competencies in line with the public health skills and career framework. We prepared a pregnancy pathway which was to consider the public health message and the impact of the midwifery contribution on the pre-conception period, during conception, well not actually during conception, that came out a bit wrong, at conception, during pregnancy and during the birth period. And we also commissioned a literature review and with a logic model to consider the public health role of the midwife. And this would gather evidence which would populate and support then the work of the other 2 groups. And that piece of work was actually carried out by Queen's University Belfast.